Welcome to a Dynamo Spotlight on Amperon. Today, Kristin Barbado, co-founder and president of Dynamo Energy Hub, interviews Alex Robart, chief revenue officer at Amperon. Amperon provides detailed, precise, and comprehensive energy grid forecasting information to help their customers keep ahead of the evolving energy landscape.
Hey, welcome. Thank you so much, Alex, for joining us today on Dynamo Spotlight on Amperon. I'm Kristin Barbado, co-founder and president of Dynamo Energy Hub, and I have the pleasure of speaking with Alex Robart, who's the chief revenue officer of Amperon. I'm going to ask if, Alex, you can give us a little bit of an overview of who you are and who Amperon is as we get underway with our spotlight on your company. So, Alex, who is Amperon? What are you doing these days? And tell us, of course, a little bit about your role.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me first off. Great to be here. Excited about our membership with Dynamo. So let's talk about quickly on myself and about Amperon. So Alex Robart at Amperon for about a year in the chief revenue officer role. It's been an awesome year so far. We've done a lot of exciting things we'll talk more about and working on a very exciting future. But my background real quickly, did a couple years at Microsoft before that in both energy and sustainability. And before that was in Houston, actually, for a dozen years in energy. Built and sold a few companies, all in data, research, consulting, software. So yeah, was really pleased when I connected with Sean through a mutual contact of ours, and was super impressed by Amperon, the products, the status with customers, and so joined up January of last year. At core, in like the pretty simple terms, we're an energy analytics and forecasting company. We really operate at the intersection of energy data, AI, and domain expertise to empower the world to navigate the energy transition more effectively. We've got a really impressive tech stack. So we use best-in-class data ingestion and management infrastructure, some really advanced AI and ML models, and predictive analytics to provide a suite of solutions to customers that really generate both economic and societal value. And our long-term vision over the next few years here is we're really seeking to modernize the grid, data, and AI software stack to improve reliability, optimize asset economics, and really accelerate decarbonization for grid operators, asset owners, and large end users who are large market participants in many cases.
That's great. Just wanted to mention how you met Sean out in Houston, I'm sure. I have a funny story about how I met Sean. It was years ago, and we were at a conference or an industry event where Amperon actually wound up winning the big award for the day. But before that happened, at lunch, it was a packed house. There were hundreds of people in a room that was probably not meant to have hundreds of people. And so I'm sure FDNY probably wasn't happy about that. But I wound up taking his co-founder's seat at lunch because it was available. And they kind of looked at me like, wait, who is this person sitting here? I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. We struck up a conversation. We wound up wedging everybody in. And that's how I met Sean and learned about Amperon. So it was kind of a funny little story there. But Sean has a way of meeting people in great ways because he's as you know, a dynamic founder and really just a phenomenal person to work with. So glad to have gotten to know him and the rest of the Amperon team. So as thanks for the introduction on who Amperon is. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what your role in the energy transition is. I know it's obviously data analytics about what's going on with grid and such, but I can't help but think of some of the other interactions that I've had with Amperon. I'm basically going to a weather report webinar soon, which is probably a really dumb way to say it, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about what that role is and how you impart critical data about weather and grid and AI.
Well, Sean's second hire for an employee at the company was and is a PhD meteorologist who's there's only a half dozen to a dozen of them who've been in the space for 20 plus years in energy. And he's one of those guys who's just been in it for a long time. So it's Dr. Mark Shipham. So we do host a quarterly weather webinar with Mark. So he provides his latest viewpoints on sort of seasonal outlook for weather. And, of course, that's a really high impact marketing event for us and thought leadership event. But it also is important because that weather expertise and the weather data that Mark spends so much time looking at is really core to our short-term forecast, our 14-day forecast, which is our most critical offerings to our customers in various flavors. Our abilities to ingest real-time weather data and stay on top of all the innovations out there amongst the many weather vendors out there is really at the core of how we deliver market-leading accuracy in our forecasts. And so it's the weather data, the fact that we're really digging into all the different weather models out there, with Mark in particular, bringing a lot of that knowledge, partnering with our data science team, and then doing dozens, if not hundreds, of really interesting things with how we're modeling out not just weather, but also our customers' energy networks and load in the markets broadly. That's kind of how it all comes together. That's sort of how the secret sauce is in there somewhere. And we put that all together to really help a range of market participants in energy and power markets to understand where is the market today from a supply and demand perspective, where is price, and how do they optimize their participation to, one, manage risk in the market, and two, to optimize how they participate in those markets, as well as to help ensure, I quoted it before, asset reliability and system reliability, knowing when supply and demand are going to go up and down, which is what drives price, is how folks are able to ensure that we all have the power that we need to run all the devices that we're on right now, and all the other things. I had a power outage for 9 hours on Monday evening, unexpectedly, from some rain and a transformer that went down because a tree fell. Just a nice reminder of the sunset around 4:30 around here right now. And I was scrambling to figure out a solution for my nanny and my 18-month-old to find somewhere with some heat and some light to actually hang out a few hours before bedtime for him.
Yeah, so I was making light of the weather report, but it's actually really, really critical information, especially for grid operators. And now that I'm in Texas, so we're thinking about the cold snaps that are going on right now in terms of, is this going to be another repeat of last year or Storm Uri that happened?
We're actually just gearing up to give access to any trader who wants it to our grid scale forecast, our short-term forecast product, just for the next week or so during this rather gnarly time. Yeah. It doesn't look like it's going to be quite as bad as Uri, but things could get a little dicey. So we want to just make our data and our forecast accessible for folks to have another view if they need it.
Yeah. So it seems like the role that you have within the energy transition is unique, and maybe you could tell us a little bit more about how that the technologies and the services that you provide are enabling companies or your customers, and a little bit about your customers too.
Yeah, we really, I think, do play a unique role in that we're right at the cross section of so many trends and a increasingly dynamic grid where markets have become more and more volatile. There's a whole bunch of macro trends driving that we can talk more about. Right. But people's understanding of when supply and demand in power markets are going to do what is become more and more critical, and we have this really unique offering that, and we had a bit of a late mover advantage coming to market. Sean and Abe founded the company about 6 years ago, and there's a few other players in the space out there, but we were able to leverage all the latest, greatest data and AI technologies out there to just build a better mousetrap. And do some really good work to pull those threads together and really fuse it with that energy and domain expertise that Sean, as a former 12-year power trader, encapsulates quite nicely. To put the best of data and AI with the best of power trading to help our customers navigate an increasingly volatile set of power markets. And as folks are electrifying everything, more and more market participants are having to participate in the market. Many of whom have never really participated in the market before, and it's a complex, dynamic thing. And so we're able to really help those folks better navigate the market with more accuracy on where market's going to go.
That's terrific, because it is daunting to try to navigate this landscape, and especially it's not getting any less complex. So these types of tools that can be offered to your customers and clients are critical. Let's talk a little bit more about some of those macro trends that you're seeing that Amperon is either driving or is seeing as part of what's driving Amperon's
Yeah.
products and services as well.
Yeah, we, in a way, we're fortunate as a company that we have all these macro trends, which really serve as tailwinds for us as a company.
Yeah.
And now these trends are positive, sort of like societally, economically, but they do represent some major pain points that folks need to go solve to help markets and really society continue to function effectively. So there's a whole bunch of things coming together. So we've got some major trends in supply, energy power supply, in demand, as well as climate change, sort of all coming together to create these tailwinds. And so let's talk supply first. So we've got increased penetration of renewables, so wind and solar primarily, as well as distributed energy resources. So that's both behind the meter, rooftop solar, and batteries. These are all coming together on the supply side to really start to disrupt energy markets, and creating two-way flows of electricity, which our current grid wasn't really designed. It was designed as a spoke model. And so
that backflow is always indicator of a problem, not by unit or multi-directional flow. Yeah,
exactly. And so that's making forecasting so much more challenging, but also more critical. Right. Next is on the demand side of things. Just from a raw demand growth and load growth, we're seeing load growth today in forecast for the next 10 years that we haven't seen in multiple generations. And this is being driven by load growth from big data centers, from the hyperscalers and others, particularly generative AI, open AI, all that is driving a massive step up in energy consumption per unit of like product usage or cloud usage. And then as well as manufacturing, a lot of like EV related manufacturing investments are driving massive load growth as well. And so you combine that with EV adoption, heat pump adoption, and electrification of industrial processes to decarbonize, it's really driving this massive wave of load growth. And you couple that with the more dynamic supply side, and it's really fundamentally shifting demand patterns and making this entire, how does supply and demand come together much more complex. Then on top of all of that, you have climate change with increased incidence of extreme weather events, making forecasting even more challenging. And these, very much like tail events are now becoming much more common. You'd expect a cold snap in Houston, like the one you're about to get, once every 100 years. Now it's like every 2 or 3 years.
I know.
Right. And so all of that comes together to, create some massive pain points, which we are out there solving. And, fortunately for us as a business, does create some tailwinds for us.
Yeah. That's a really nice synopsis of how these macro trends are showing how dynamic and volatile the operating of not just the grid, but also all of the customer-sided operations. Yeah. It's really so much more tricky now to figure out optimizing your supply and demand. So this is great.
And I'll add one more layer of complexity on top, even, just managing what we just talked about and like managing your physical power flows so that you're not, really at risk from a price perspective is hard enough. But layer on the carbon construct on top.
Sure.
In understanding what are the carbon attributes associated with that power, and then starting to execute transactions to actually ensure that you have, fully decarbonized power supply makes even more complex. You start to take the data that underlies that grid and the markets themselves, and then start to figure out how to attach high resolution carbon attributes to that at the localized, zonal or even like meter level. Yeah. That creates even more complexity. And that's another thing that, we are just so perfectly positioned as a company. We've already solved the really tricky volumetric time series electricity data management and ingestion problems. And so, we're very comfortable with managing that data. Adding the carbon data on top of that is really, quite easy for us, given we've already solved the really tricky data problems. And so we're working with a range of customers on the scope 2 or carbon attributes around your power and electricity as well.
That's great. When you think back to maybe 20 years ago or so with, when you look at load curves, they were pretty simple compared to what you're trying to figure out now. So makes prediction a lot more difficult. But thankfully, Amperon is around to make some predictions much smoother sailing.
Yeah.
So tell us about some of the things that you're working on. What are some big things that you see in the future for 2024?
Yeah. We have a new offering, what we're calling asset level solar forecast. This is generation forecast for utility scale and distribution scale solar assets, solar plants. We're super excited about that. We've been working on that with some customers for pushing 6 months now. So just formally flip that commercial, and we'll kick off a broader commercialization effort here in the next couple of weeks. That's very exciting for us. Just the first of many new product things this year. What I just alluded to before around carbon, some scope 2 analytics work with a whole range of customers across the power and utilities value chain. That's super excited for us, and still very new. And we expect over the course of the year, we'll take that work and really start to scale it out with a lot more customers. And then, doing some work in some new markets outside of our core North American market. We've worked in Australia.
Yep.
We serve AMO, the Australian Energy Market Operator, and have now for 3, maybe even as many as 4 years now. But besides that one sort of separate customer, we've been very focused in North America, and so we'll be announcing some new markets here quite shortly. So that's been, of course, a work in progress for the last 3 to 6 months, and we're really excited about building out a new team and really scaling up our commercial efforts in some new markets.
That sounds very exciting. And I'm sure that you've got some great customer growth too. I'm thinking as we were talking about the conversation, you probably have a lot of customers, those grid operators, utilities, as well as do you have customers that are also on the other side of the meter?
We do. Now it's still an evolving and growing customer segment for us. Let's call it corporates or large C&I buyers or end users. We've got a handful, probably about half a dozen of those customers today, doing slightly different things in some cases. But we expected this segment over the next, let's call it 3 years, with the volume of PPAs that some of these customers are executing. Think my former employer, Microsoft, massive volume. Some of the big telecom companies, AT&T, Verizon, they're huge PPA off takers now. They all need better tools to understand both all of the sort of the asset management around their PPAs, as well as the physical risk around their load, and how effectively do those PPAs actually protect them from physical price risk.
Right.
That's all really new territory for a lot of these folks. And then with the massive growth in data centers, they're all looking to better understand and manage their risk as well. So, and then you add all of the electrification of industrial processes. Those, particularly big hydrocarbons players, they're all shifting more and more of their carbon footprints from scope 1 fuels over into scope 2 electricity. And so they're also going to need to better become market participants and understand how to do that without sort of getting fleeced in the market.
Right.
And so we see a lot of new players in the corporate side coming to market, and we're just perfectly positioned to be one of the players to help them.
Yeah, and I think part and parcel to some of these trends that we were talking about before, you look at a lot of the solutions that are happening on the customer side that are driving such different demand patterns. So if you're looking at EV charging in urban areas, it's something that needs to be considered for what the grid can do, what it can handle, how it can operate. Especially as those types of loads grow and at what time of day. And these are a lot of complex issues that require massive amounts of data and analytics.
Yep.
So I'm sure as you're using and employing more AI to help anticipate and to plan for your clients' needs, this is really where Amperon shines. Last question for you is, I know that we've actually had a few events that we've seen Amperon people attend, and we love to see it. We were actually saw a lot of you out in the UK not too long ago, so that was great. And just wanted to ask you about how are things going with Dynamo, and because we're so glad that you're members, and love to see some more interactions as we go along with the big things coming up for us this year as well.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with Dynamo personally up until I joined Amperon,
Okay.
and started to get more engaged. We've been really pleased with our experience and our membership there. It's a really dynamic community that brings innovators and thought leaders together. So great networking has come out of it for us, and
Yeah.
particularly for Sean, who's been
Even if some of them like steal your seats at lunch, sometimes,
There you go. There you go. Even despite that, you guys have just been such a great partner to help us really reach and engage with new audiences. And we as a company have transformed quite significantly in the last 12 to 18 months. And
Yes.
we've been actively trying to engage new audiences, think about things like carbon. How do we sort of build on our building blocks to start to solve those problems? The Dynamo community has really helped us to reach out to some new audiences who are more relevant to our future growth.
That's great. Love to hear it. That's the whole name of the game. We love to see that our members are getting visibility, meeting others, being able to collaborate, and we know that we've had some great interactions with almost cross pollination of not only potential clients and collaborations that you've had, but also some really important people on the Amperon team that have come from the Dynamo network. So we're glad to see that as well. Anyway, that wraps it up for us. So I just wanted to thank you again, Alex, for taking the time to speak with us. We love hearing about the great things our members are doing, and excited. I'm actually personally very excited to hear about your colleagues' weather webinar, because now it's really near and dear to my heart what's going on in Texas. So I know there's going to be some interesting information there. Thank you again, and we look to see you at another Dynamo event soon.
This has been a Dynamo Spotlight on Amperon. You can find more of Dynamo's work on our website, dynamoenergyhub.com, as well as LinkedIn, Instagram, and of course, YouTube. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.